تحمي الوطن.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on FutureTV. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's headlines. Education Minister Ilyas Boussab insists on holding official school exams, dismissing calls to postpone the test from Speaker Nabih Berri. The Syndicate Coordination Committee kicks off a sit-in inside the Ministry of Education to demand the approval of the new wage scale. And Iran and the United States engaged in the second day of talks on Tehran's contested nuclear program. The Syndicate Coordination Committee has kicked off a sit-in inside the Ministry of Education in UNESCO area to demand the approval of the new wage scale. Engaged public sector employees and teachers gathered inside the ministry, shouting slogans and holding banners that reject the ongoing delay in endorsing the draft law by lawmakers as the parliament failed to reach a breakthrough over the controversial dispute. Head of Public Secondary School Education Teachers Association Hanna Gharib called on SEC protesters to remain at the Ministry of Education, announcing that the committee will kick off an open-ended strike. He accused lawmakers of holding the Lebanese people as hostages and said the official exams will not be held. Yesterday, Parliament once again failed to meet to vote on the controversial wage scale that has been a key demand by the Union Coordination Committee for holding the exams. Berri postponed the session to June the 19th over lack of quorum. Only 54 MPs showed up, while the required quorum is 65. Kataib Party leader Amin Jmail reiterates that Parliament could not legislate in light of a presidential void. The Lebanese constitution is very clear. Parliament turns into an electoral body in the last 10 days before the end of a president's term and not a legislative body, Jmail said, speaking from Kirki after meeting with Maronite Patriarch Bashar Rai. He added, once a new president is elected, the political, parliamentary and constitutional life will be organized, and then the urgent draft law will be discussed. Jmail said the presidency was the mother institution that paved way for addressing other issues and insisted that all efforts should go toward the election of a new president. He criticized lawmakers boycotting the parliamentary sessions to elect a new head of state, calling it unethical in the sake of the constitution, the nation and parliament. Earlier today, Education Minister Ilyas Boussab held talks with Progressive Socialist Party leader MP Walid Jumblat, who announced a day earlier that his parliamentary bloc will attend the legislative session but will not approve the new wage scale. A behind-closed-doors meeting was also held between Speaker Nabih Berri, Boussab and Finance Minister Ali Hassan Khalil ahead of the parliamentary session. Another meeting was held between Prime Minister Tamam Slam, MP Bahia Hariri and Berri. Education Minister Ilyas Boussab says he remains adamant on holding official school exams, dismissing calls to postpone the test from Speaker Nabih Berri as well as civil servants. Boussab told a news conference from Parliament that the exams will be held on Thursday and cannot be postponed as students are suffering the most. Speaker Nabih Berri has condemned excuses by lawmakers to disrupt legislative sessions under the pretext of a presidential void, as well as some MPs flip-flopping on the public sector wage hike bill. Berri told Advantage of the lack of quorum during the legislative session, which was scheduled to resume discussion on the new salary scale, to address lawmakers and clarify his stance on the boycott of Parliament. Berri said there were various motives behind disrupting both the legislative and the executive branches, accusing some lawmakers of trying to avoid talks on a new electoral law and holding the parliamentary election altogether. The Maronite Patriarchy has denied that it had a list of potential candidates to the presidency, dismissing allegations by presidential hopeful Samir Jaja. The church also said it had not named anyone for the presidency and did not support a particular candidate. Jaja, who heads the Lebanese forces, said he was ready to endorse the list of candidates put forth by the Maronite Church to end the vacuum in Lebanon's top Christian post. He cited former ministers Diminianos Katir, Roger Deeb and Ziad Baroud as the candidates suggested by the Maronite Church. Iran and the United States engage in a second day of talks on Tehran's contested nuclear program, with Washington warning of tough choices ahead of a July deadline for a deal. The closed-door two-day meeting in Geneva, which began yesterday, marks a new effort to find common ground between Tehran and Washington, amid concerns that tensions between the two could damage efforts to strike a deal between the Islamic Republic and world powers. As the first day of talks drew to a close, Washington acknowledged that time was running out. A deadline of July 20th has been set to turn a temporary deal struck in November in Geneva into a permanent agreement. Joining us today is the Salam Party leader, Monsieur Roger Edé. Welcome, Monsieur Edé.
Hello.
The issue of the new wage scale is making headlines nowadays, and it's been even overshadowing the presidential elections. Do you agree with Speaker Nabih Berri that it's just a pretext to disrupt legislative sessions?
I disagree with Speaker Berri, as I disagree with the project as in itself. I don't think the state can afford today, in any foreseeable future, in fact, what has been decided by the cabinet of Mikati. And the economy cannot afford any increase in taxes. That means in both cases we will be going into a suicidal approach economically. And we should remember that in Western Europe, and specifically in France, Italy, Spain, 52% unemployment has been reached already when it comes to the youth. It means what? It means when you hurt the economy with higher taxes, you end up with your kids looking for job elsewhere, leaving the country eventually, or waiting depressed in their home for a better miracle. We should, in Lebanon, think seriously about the situation in the economy. We should stop having a cowardly approach to dealing with the economy and with labor. Labor, especially you cannot take as hostages a government institution. That is illegal. You cannot take as hostages all the youth who have been working all year long to get their exams by the end of the year. That is criminal.
What solution would you provide to the Syndicate Coordination Committee in that
Nothing.
case?
I would tell them I cannot afford it. I be honest with them. Stop making politics and ignoring the reality of your economy and what you can or you cannot afford. Neither the state can afford it, nor the economy can afford to raise taxes of any kind to get anywhere in this time where Lebanon is living the worst period since many years of its economical development.
So do you think that as long as they continue their protests, we will not have a president, actually?
President, that has nothing to do with these people. The president will be decided between the international community and Iran in their bilateral negotiation. And every other player, as we have seen now, that Saudi Arabia, Turkey, France is scheduling meetings, bilateral meetings with Iran next week. What's happening in the world is what's happening with Iran.
This brings me to my next question. The United States are engaging in a second day of talks on Tehran's contested nuclear program. Do you think an agreement will be reached, or will there be an extension to the Geneva Agreement?
I am certain an agreement will be reached. I think in every negotiation, you leave the difficult issues to the end. But what I know as of today is that President Obama is determined to close a deal, and Iran is eager to close the deal now. They don't want to delay the closing of the deal for another 6 months because they are afraid that the post-Obama period, and that period can start after the next election in November, because the president can lose the Senate and then any control over government. Become a lame duck. And that is what is expected today from Iran, is to close the deal on every issue, normalize relation with its neighbors, become a constructive power, not a destructive, negative power. So Iran is expecting President Obama to reset the clock before the revolution of 1979. That means to become to become a player and a policeman in participation with other powers like Israel, Turkey, the Arab world.
So, Monsieur, did you believe that this agreement will affect the presidency in Lebanon? What is your opinion on
only
that?
this agreement can produce a president.
Only disagreement?
Yes.
Can you elaborate?
Very simple, because we cannot, as Lebanese, among ourselves, choose among ourselves the president. The history of the Lebanese election has always been a compromise between the West and the Eastern regional powers. Since Fuad Shahab, before him Camille Chamhoun, after him every president, even when Sulaiman Frangieh was elected with one vote against Ilyas Sarkis in 1970, it was not a compromise but a fight where the players against the Taif agreement were able to get in Sulaiman Frangieh, but the Cairo agreement survived.
My last question to you is, could this agreement eventually solve the Syrian crisis?
No. I don't think the Syrian crisis is more than a crisis planned to allow for the new order to develop within the next 2 years or 10 to 15 years. That means if there is a conflict in Syria, it will be contained in Syria. That is the objective. Not to have it destroy completely whatever measure of order we have in Iraq, and not spill over Lebanon, because Lebanon is a nerve center that can make the whole Mashriq, the whole Middle East, sick of that war between Sunni and Shia. Everyone wants to prevent, except the one who are benefiting from it, which are not the Arabs.
That was Al Salam Party leader, Monsieur Roger Ede. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
And coming up next, Hollywood star Angelina Jolie and British Foreign Secretary William Hague host a summit in London on sexual violence in war zone. More after the break. Welcome back. Reuven Rivlin, a far-right member of Israel's ruling Likud, has been elected by Parliament as the nation's 10th president when Shimon Peres steps down in July. Announcing the results of a runoff vote, Parliamentary Speaker Yuli Edelstein said Rivlin had defeated his centrist challenger, Meir Shitrit, by 63 votes to 53 in a secret ballot of the Knesset's 120 MPs. Moving on to the UK, Hollywood star Angelina Jolie and British Foreign Secretary William Hague are hosting a 4-day summit in London on sexual violence in war zones, attended by officials from over 100 countries. The summit aims to identify ways to improve investigation of sexual violence and provide support for women and girls. Speaking before the summit, Jolie declared it would be a summit like no other and dedicated to a rape victim she'd met who had never had justice for what had been done to her. Hague and Jolie were scheduled to launch an international protocol to help strengthen prosecutions for rape and conflicts the following day. On Thursday, Hague will host a meeting focusing on the Islamist terrorist group Boko Haram, which will be attended by foreign ministers from Nigeria and neighboring African countries. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. Education Minister Ilyas Boussab insists on holding official school exams, dismissing calls to postpone the test from Speaker Nabih Berri. The Syndicate Coordination Committee kicks off a sit-in inside the Ministry of Education to demand the approval of the new wage scale. And Iran and the United States engage in a second day of talks on Tehran's contested nuclear program. Those are your top stories from the English news team here at Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and I'll see you again tomorrow for more updates.